jurisdictions, and I'd now like to go to the questions. And there's a fair amount of overlap in the questions, so what I'm going to attempt to do here is to consolidate those questions that are similar. Some of them are clearly directed to one panelist or the other. Some are directed to both. But to the extent a question is to one of the panelists, we'll certainly give the other an opportunity to respond if necessary. The first question will be directed to Mr. Loveman, and that is that there have been many people suggesting that casinos are harmful to some of the businesses that already exist. This particular question cites the director of the Hanover Theater in Worcester as writing that the casinos will, quote, destroy their business and spin off businesses like restaurants that will not be able to, the local restaurants and other cultural businesses will not be able to compete with the casinos. Could you respond to that, please?
I'd be happy to. This is a question that comes up, like many of these, in every jurisdiction that considers the question. And I'll give you an example to make the point. Our New Orleans casino, where we are now the largest employer in New Orleans, opened initially with restrictions around how many restaurants we could operate, and the same issues were raised, Alice, about whether people would spend all their money at the casino and not visit any of the other rather remarkable cultural activities that are on offer in New Orleans. And now, 10 years later, exactly the opposite has been proven to be true. When you operate a big destination resort of one sort or another, casino or otherwise, you bring an awful lot of people to the city, and we do in New Orleans, and the same would be true here in Boston. And some of them spend most of their money in the casino, but a large number of other people spend their money in all the other places that surround it. So this is another case where if you were to look at the Restaurant Association's position in St. Louis and Kansas City and Reno and New Orleans and Sydney and London, and pick your favorite cosmopolitan city, you would find that in every instance there's an initial fear that exactly this will happen. And in every instance there's a realization over time that the opposite happens.
Senator Tucker, would you care to comment?
Yeah, it's just, it's not a revenue neutral source of income. It eats, it's like a cannibal. It eats other forms of revenue like sales tax. I mean, when people are putting billions down the slots and not going out to their favorite restaurant or buying a refrigerator, it has some very huge, profound downside impacts on the state economy.
The next question I'm going to address first to Senator Tucker, and that is, can you be specific in what infrastructure costs, this question, although it uses the term infrastructure, it seems to be directed towards the resources that are necessary to treat gambling addiction. And specifically, the questioner wants to know whether health insurance covers treatment, and if so, do you know the extent to which that increase in gambling addiction might affect premiums for others?
That's a very good question, and I know that, as with all addictions, we spend a phenomenal amount of money in this country and in the Commonwealth with the fallout from addiction. A study was done that showed 1 out of 5 homeless people in the United States are in a homeless shelter due to a gambling addiction. That's pretty amazing when you consider that it costs us about $30,000 a year to shelter someone in a homeless shelter. In Southern Connecticut, 8 years ago, there were 43 cases of embezzlement indicted. In 2007, there were 434. Who pays for all of those court costs? A prison bed now is $50,000 a year. The taxpayers pay. So those are just a few examples of how the industry itself does not pay for the costs that it inflicts on the rest of us. And I like to use the example of the gorgeous Merrimack River that runs through my district, a little north of here. And for years, the mills used it as a septic system, a garbage dump. And it would be red one day and blue one day, and if you fell in that river, your mother would get you to the hospital for a tetanus shot so fast. And when the mills left, The taxpayers cleaned it up to the tune of billions of dollars, and now you can swim in it and sail in it, but the industry that created the problem didn't pay to clean it up.
Do you care to comment?
Well, sure. The legislature will pass whatever fiscal rules it wishes with respect to gambling, and it will certainly involve a very substantial revenue tax. I want to point out that there are scarcely any industries on the planet other than gasoline and liquor that pay revenue taxes. And this, despite Senator Tucker's allegations to the contrary, will generate hundreds of millions of dollars of proceeds. Now, how the legislature chooses to spend that is entirely up to them. There are jurisdictions that put a portion of this toward problem gambling counseling and services, toward local community development, toward education. They can put it toward their own retirements. It's entirely up to them, but it's not the industry that is misallocating this money, nor is it the industry that generally misallocates state revenues. It's the legislature that has that job. So however it is that Senator Tucker and her colleagues choose to use this money, they'll use it, I hope, to whatever is its best purpose.
The next question is somewhat related to the prior question, and it's directed to Mr. Loveman. The questioner wants to know, I'm going to combine two questions here, one of which is when you state that there's not an increase in addiction around casinos, what is the geographic area that you are including in that? And then related to that would be what percentage of casino revenue comes from those who are addicted, and what is the basis for that? Where can one find the evidence for that response?
The studies that look for the incidence of different types of social issues around a casino tend to focus on a 50-mile radius around the casino. So the statistics I'm describing have to do with people that live in that area. And the 50-mile number is chosen typically because beyond that, there's access to multiple locations in most jurisdictions around the country. With respect to the statement about addicted gamblers, we don't know everyone who is an addicted gambler when we watch 16,000 people walk through Harrahs in New Orleans on a given Friday night. We make these estimations based on what we learn from the therapeutic community in each of these jurisdictions who treats addicted gamblers. And we look to see what level of gaming revenue they suggest to their therapists they've been involved in. And we take a look at what percentage that is compared to the revenues that are generated throughout the business generally. Now, despite what a lot of people think about the business, this is a luxury good business that has revenues that are generated mainly from people that are in a position to support non-essential activities. So these are people that are a little older than average and a little wealthier than average, not people that are younger and poorer than average. And while these folks make sound decisions about how they entertain themselves, they make sound decisions on any number of other folks. And that's how we're able to determine what the incidence of addicted gambling behavior is on the total revenues of an industry.
Senator Tucker, do you care to comment, or we can move to the next question? Senator Tucker, the next question is directed to you, is if there is so much evidence available on addiction, public safety, family harm, etc., why have so many other states adopted gambling in the past 25 years, and is there something that makes Massachusetts unique?
It's a great question. I frankly think that states have gone down this road for two reasons. The pattern all over the country is, but all our money is going to Iowa, or it's all going to Illinois. So that game is played everywhere, that we have to do it because so-and-so is doing it. And that accounts for a large amount of the increase. Now, what happens once the casino industry is here, you can't pull the plug. It's impossible. Because then you get the threats of the jobs will go away, and the state becomes the biggest addict of the revenue. And that's why it's so, we don't need to go down this road. Massachusetts has a brand, and I think most of you share that brand with me. Higher education, the best health care in the world, scenic beauty, Cape Cod, the Berkshires, cultural institutions, which, by the way, are hysterical